Hi guys, here we are with People of Sparks. We're on chapter 8, page 90, the roamer and the bike. What is a roamer? Why am I asking questions? I don't even know. We need to read and find out. Several days passed. Poppy would get a little better and then a little worse, and Lena and Mrs. Murdo stayed with her nearly all the time, putting cool rags on her forehead and trying to get her to drink the medicine the doctor gave her. When Mrs. Murdo wasn't caring for Poppy, she was prowling around the medicine room, inspecting the doctor's jumbled collection of herbs and potions and powders, making notes in a tiny notebook and rearranging things, trying to create some order. Dr. Hester was often gone, seeing patients in the village, and when she was in the house, she was doing 10 things at once, or trying to, and being interrupted by patients who came to the door at all hours. It seemed to Lena that the people of Sparks were constantly cutting themselves, spraining their muscles, getting rashes, and falling ill. Excuse me. The doctor would give them medicine or bandage their wounds, and a few days later the patients would bring something in return: a basket of eggs, a jar of pickles, a bag of clean rags. Lena had never seen anyone so disorganized as the doctor. She peeked into the medicine room once the doctor was out and was amazed at the clutter in there. Shelves and cupboards and tables piled with stuff in bottles and stuff in boxes and stuff in jars, all higgledy-piggledy. That's a great word that means, here's another fun one, willy-nilly. It just means disorganized. Higgledy-piggledy means nothing is in order, everything is in disarray. How Dr. Hester found anything, she couldn't imagine. It took the doctor a couple of days even to get organized enough to figure out how Lena could help her. But when she did, she began giving her one chore after another, and sometimes several all at once, often forgetting Lena didn't know how to do them. "Could you go and water the asparagus?" she'd say. Then, before Lena could ask what asparagus was, and where to find it, and what to put the water in, she'd say, "And can you rip some of those rags in the kitchen basket into strips for the bandages? And when you're done with that, maybe you could just wipe the floor in the medicine room. I spilled something the other day, I think over by the window. And the chickens, yes, they need to be fed." And then she'd be out the door, leaving Lena to remember the string of tasks and to figure out how to do them. Everything here seemed extremely inconvenient to Lena. To get water, you had to go outside the gate to a pump and work a stiff handle up and down. To go to the bathroom, you had to go out in the back of the house to a little smelly shed. Ugh. There was no light at night except for the candles, and at first she thought there was no stove to cook on. "Oh, yes," said the doctor, "that's the stove there." She pointed at the thing like a black iron barrel in the corner of the kitchen. But I hardly ever use it in the summer. It's much too much trouble to keep the fire going, and it's just way too hot anyway. We mainly just eat cold food in the summer." When she did want to cook something, boil a pot of water to cook an egg, for instance, or make tea, the doctor had to squat down, stuff some dry grass in the twigs in the stove's belly, and set them alight. Sometimes she used a match. Sometimes she hit what looked like two rocks together until they made a spark and the grass caught fire. That's called a flint. Then she had to feed in bigger and bigger twigs until the fire was finally hot enough. This fire seemed fairly safe to Lena, though she didn't like to get too close to it. At least it was contained in its iron box. It wasn't free to leap out at her like the fire in the fireplace. Fortunately, the doctor didn't make another fire in the fireplace after that first night. And the days had gotten hotter and hotter, and the nights were no longer cool. Extra warmth was the last thing they needed. One day, a week or so after Lena first came to the doctor's house, a patient came with news to tell, as well as a wound to bind. She was a scrawny young woman with brownish teeth. She had a bad scratch on her wrist where she had scraped it against some rusty wire. "There's a roamer in the village." Excuse me, she said. "Pardon me, just arrived this morning." "What's a roamer?" Lena asked. The doctor, tying a rag around her patient's wrist, said, "Roamers go out into the empty lands and bring things back." The empty lands to me sound a lot like the unknown regions of Ember, except I think people know what's going on in the empty lands. "From the old places," added the patient. "You know, the ruined places." "My brother Casper's a roamer," said Corin, "and when I'm old enough, I'm going to be a roamer too. and we're going to be partners." This was the first time Lena had sensed real happiness in Torin. His eyes shone with hope. "Well, that'll be exciting," said Lena. "Is it dangerous to be a roamer?" "Oh, yeah. Sometimes you run into other roamers trying to get the same things you want, and then sometimes you're attacked by bandits. You have to fight them off. Casper has a whip." "A whip?" "Yeah, it's like a great long cord, as long as this room almost. If people get in the way, he lashes them." He lifted his arm overhead and brought it down as if he were lashing something. What? He said. Page 94. "Now stop that," said the doctor absently, tying the final knot in the rag. The patient left, and Lena and the doctor and Torin, along with Mrs. Murdo, carrying Poppy, went down to the market plaza to see the roamer. The crowd had assembled in the plaza. Lena looked for Doom, but she didn't see him. She saw only a few Emberites, in fact. Most of them must have been working in other places. But a great many villagers were there, clustered around a big truck. The truck was loaded with barrels and crates, and on it stood a brown-skinned woman with wiry muscles in her arms and legs. "I have been far to the north," she cried out in a shrill, strong voice, "out in the remote corners of the empty lands. I have traveled roads where I saw no human being for weeks on end, and in these distant regions I came across houses and farms that have never before been searched. I have treasures for you today." She beckoned with a long brown arm. "Step up and look." The crowd pressed forward. Apparently, this roamer was known to the villagers. Some people called out greetings and questions. "Hey, did you bring us any writing paper this time, Mackie?" "What about seeds?" "Yeah, what about some tools?" "Yeah, and matches?" "And clothes. Oh, gosh, I'm so tired of wearing this homemade patchwork." "I have all that and more," the woman called. "Come close. Special things first." She bent over an open crate and rummaged around for a moment. When she stood up again, she was holding a blackened iron cooking pot, so big that she had to use both hands to lift it. "What am I offered?" she cried. "Half a bushel of dried apricots." I'll offer you a bushel of peas." "A barrel of cornmeal." The woman listened, cocking her head, eyebrows raised. She waited until the offer stopped, and then pointed at a tall woman with shiny black hair who had offered 5 loaves of apricot cornbread. "Done," she said, and she lowered the pot into the young woman's hands. For the next special thing, the roamer reached into a big cardboard box. She brought out a smaller box colored blue and held it high. "Soap flakes," she cried. That's like laundry detergent. 24 boxes of them. Dozens of people bid for these. They were all gone in minutes. Then came more cooking pans, 2 thick jackets of shiny material, rolls of rope, garden tools, books, a pair of scissors, some doorknobs, some nails. There were a few odd, useless things, too. For half a dozen carrots, one woman bought a pair of faucets, one with an H and one with a C. What would that H be for? Hot water. So what would the C be for? Cold water. Easy. "What will you do with them?" asked Lena. People here got their water from long-handled pumps that stood at certain spots in the village. No one had indoor running water. "Well, I'll turn them upside down," said the woman. "They'll make good candle holders." When the roamer brought out a handful of jewels, Lena gasped. She had never seen such things. Necklaces and bracelets made of gleaming stones and silver chains. But only a few people seemed interested in them, and they bid hardly anything. One girl bid a couple of potatoes, but a man got them for a slightly used pair of sandals. "Yeah, if my wife doesn't want them," he said, "I'll use them to pretty up my oxen." The roamer brought out the last of her wares, packets of paper, boxes of safety pins, some spoons and forks. The doctor stepped up to buy a small set of glass bottles. "Dr. Hester," the roamer said. "Good to see you." "And you, Mackie," said the doctor. "It's been a long time." "I was hoping you'd be here," the roamer went on. "I ran into your nephew the other day." "Casper?" cried Torin in a voice so piercing that several people looked up, startled. "Where is he?" "Well, he was up in the apple country," said Mackie. "I told him I was coming down here, and he said to tell you that he's headed for home." "Is that right?" said the doctor. She was clearly not as excited as Torin. "Well, we haven't seen him in quite a while."
1 year, 10 months, and 19 days, said Torin. "When will he be here? Did he say?"
"Should be soon," said the roamer. She was putting the little bottles into a cloth bag. I guess within the next week or two? I don't know. When the roamer's sail was over, Lena walked home along the river road with the doctor and Mrs. Murdo and Poppy, who was asleep in Mrs. Murdo's arms. Torin leapt ahead, his thin legs splaying out sideways. He bounced off steps, jumped into walls, leapt up to grab branches and trees, and swung from them. As they neared the doctor's house, Torin, who was way ahead of them by now, suddenly turned around and raced back.
"Hey, you got to get out of our room," he said to Lena and Mrs. Murdo. "My brother will want his own room, and he'll want to be with me, so you all have to move."
"Fine," said Lena. "We will. We'll go live with our own people as soon as Poppy's well enough." And Torin's narrow face lit up.
"Oh, good, he said. "When are you leaving?"
"Well, not today," said Lena. Not right this minute."
"Yeah, but soon,"
Torin cried. He skipped ahead of them, through the gate and across the courtyard. The doctor said not to mind Torin. He was being rude because he was so excited. But it seemed to Lena that Dr. Hester didn't see clearly when it came to Torin. He wasn't rude just when he was excited. He was rude nearly all the time. The doctor was so preoccupied with her work that she hardly noticed him. Maybe if she'd pay him more attention, Lena thought, he wouldn't be so awful. But he was awful, and Lena would be glad to get away from him. 2 weeks, she thought. Then we'll meet Casper the Great. And if Poppy is well by then, Torin can have his room back, and we'll go live with Dune and the others. Now and then, Lena saw people on wheels going by on the road in front of the doctor's house. The only wheeled vehicles Lena had ever seen were the heavy wooden carts in Ember. But these people were riding beautiful, slender devices, 2 big wheels per person. They glided by, their feet going around and around. She wanted to do it too, so badly she wanted to. "What are they?" she asked the doctor. "Can you guess?" "Bikes, of course," said the doctor. "You've never seen one?" "No," said Lena, looking at the bike with longing. If she could have a bike, she thought, she could go even faster than when she ran. She could go so fast and so far. She looked out toward the endless rolling hills. She could go everywhere. She could go wherever the roads ended. "Oh, I wish I could ride one," she said. "Well, you can if you want," said the doctor. "There's an old one out behind the tool shed. I suppose it still works."
"There is?"
Lena nearly dropped the basket of eggs she had just gathered.
"May I get it now?"
"I guess so," said the doctor. "But would you mind watering the parsley first, please? And if you could just shell those peas and maybe wash the spinach?" Lena did these tasks in a fever of impatience, and when she was finished, she dashed out to the shed. The bike was leaning against the shed wall. It was old but beautiful, made of wires and slender pipes and rods, some of them silver under their coat of dust and some of them red. Thin, weedy vines wove among the spokes of the bike's wheels, and cobwebs draped its seat. Lena took hold of 2 handles and pulled the bike from its nest. She wheeled it out onto the road in front of the house and brushed the cobwebs and dried leaves and bits of grass off of it, and then she swung one leg over and settled herself on the seat. Now what? She spent the rest of the morning figuring it out. She pushed the pedals, rolled forward, tipped over sideways, and then had to put her feet down. She rolled forward again but didn't know how to turn. She fell off. She heaved the bike upright and tried again. She fell off again. After an hour or so of this, she gave up and went inside for a while. And later, when she tried again, something had changed. This was kind of like when I was learning to ride a bike, and maybe when you learned how to ride a bike. It seemed impossible at first. But then one day, you just hopped on it, and your body magically knew what to do. A little bit of practice goes a long way. She had the feel for it in her legs now, or somewhere in her. She rolled forward. She put a foot on the pedal and pushed. She rolled farther. She brought up the other foot, and magically her body understood for a second what to do.
She was sailing. Her feet were going around and around, and a smile broke across her face. She held on, feet going round, breathless, breeze against her. A whole long distance, maybe 5 yards, before suddenly she was nervous and dragged her feet along the ground to stop. She stood holding the handlebars, her mouth open in amazement. And by the end of the day, she had it. She could ride back and forth on the road. She could stop whenever she wanted to. She could even turn around corners without putting her foot down. "I'm going to see Dune," she told Mrs. Murdo. She was longing to see Dune, longing to talk to someone she really knew. Mrs. Murdo was fine, of course, but she was a grown-up. Lena wanted to be with a friend. She got on the bike and rode, sweeping down the river road into the plaza, where she asked someone for directions, and out on the other side of town, to the hotel. When she got there, she stopped for a moment just to stare. The enormous old building looked to her like a wonderful place to live. She felt a sudden longing to have a place of her own, a room there, back among her old friends and neighbors. We'll pick up another time when she and Dune reunite at the Pioneer Hotel. All right, guys. Happy reading. We'll see you soon.